had another amazing day today with first grade and Miss Chen. So I'll start my day, and today's highlight really was Tamron. She's so cute, and she was like just with me today. And so anyway, so start of the day, I went to Mrs. Chen with first grade, and then I was with her, and they were doing this like make me biography thing and drawing themselves, and then I took them to recess, and then at recess I was with Tamron and Mia, and then I was talking to Tamron because she said it's her birthday tomorrow, and then I figured out Tristan is her brother. They're twins. And I was like, how old are you turning? 6 or 7? She was like 7, and she was cute, and she had a little lollipop, a green lollipop. And then we walked out to recess primary playground, and then we stopped by these benches where all the kids were in recess. There was a lot of them. And then she was just eating her lollipop and leaning on this little pillar thing of like the bench roof thingy. And then I just started talking to her about her birthday, and I was like, what are you gonna do tomorrow? Are you gonna have a party? And she was like, no, not tomorrow, but I think Saturday we're gonna go to Legoland. And I was like, oh, cool, Legos. Are you gonna have like a Lego style cake and a Lego style birthday party? And she said, no, I don't think so, but I would like a cake. And then that was cute. And then I started talking to her about swinging. She said there's construction over there. What are they building? And I was like, oh, I guess they're fixing it. Yeah. She was like, yeah, I guess they're fixing it. And then I said, oh, do you swing a lot? You like the swings? She was like, yeah, I like the swings. I'm like, do you ever jump off the swings really high? And she was like, yeah. And then I was like, I remember when I was your age, I jumped off a swing super high, and I broke my foot. I like landed on a bed, and I showed my foot like getting rolled. And then I said, then I broke it, and it sucked. I had to wear a cast for 2 weeks, but then I healed, and I got better again. And then she was like, oh, dang, that's crazy. Or no, she didn't, but yeah, she was just like, heard me. And then she said that her friend's mom was driving, and then like this whole crazy story of like, and then. And then she said they were on like the freeway, and then she took a turn. It was her niece, and her like son, the three of them, and she just went on this crazy story about how they got hurt. And it was hard to hear because all the chatter around during the recess, and all the kids, and me was trying to talk to me at the same time. And then she said, I don't know, something. And then that's when Gracie and Tiffany walked up to me, I think. Or I think it was just Gracie. Gracie and Enzo. Gracie and Enzo walked up to me. And then they asked, can you play jump rope with us again? And I was like, yeah, I can. And then I looked at Tamron and Mia and I was like, hey, do you want to play jump rope with us, Tamron? And she was like, no, I'm okay. Maybe later. And I was like, okay. And then Mia was like, after you're done playing with them, can you play with me? And I was like, yeah. I never did though. But then, so then I went with Enzo and Gracie. And then we did jump rope. And then as we were doing it, it was just me, Enzo, and Gracie. And then we were doing the jump rope, and they were like loving it and being cute. And then Tiffany just walked in out of nowhere and was like, I'm in. And so then I had 3 of them in line. And then they were taking turns, Gracie and Enzo, and then Tiffany to swing the jump rope, and I was always swinging it. And then after that, the girl from yesterday came, and she started to play, wanted to play with us. And then another girl came, randomly started wanting to play with us. Then Ivan came, and then later, all of a sudden, Tamron came. And then even Mia came. She never got in the thing to jump, but Mia came. But then Tamron came, and then she got the jump rope to like swing. Me and her were swinging, and I was like, "Hey, Tamron, let's go on 3." Because she was like doing it like early and fast and not good. Whoa. But then we did it on 3. I was like 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And then we went and they started jumping, and then yeah, they kept messing up only after 1 or 2 tries because not all 3 of them would go. 2 of them would go, but then 1 of them would miss, and then they just kept going, and that was cute. And then after that, a bunch more kids came, like a huge crowd, and they all wanted to get in the line, but there's just too many of them. So I was like, there's too many of you guys. We can only do 3 at a time. And then all the crowd there in front of me, they all just looked at me and raised their hands saying, me, me, me. And I was like, okay, okay, I'm going to pick only 3. And so I picked the 3. I asked for names. They were like, you're going to go, you're going to go, Gracie's going to go. And then they went, and then they gave them like 3 or 4 turns. And then after that, I gave the other kids their 3 turns, and then they went in, and they all followed nicely because they're great kids, actually. Because they're great kids, actually. And then after that, we did more jump ropes with them, and then I kept switching out, other kids, more kids, and I still was doing it with Tamron, and then Tiffany wanted to swing it herself, and I let her, and then after that, they were all just swinging and jumping, and then after that, like, all of them wanted to join, and there was like 5 of them, and I was like, there's still too many. And then I looked back and I saw another jump rope thing, and I looked like, hey guys, there's a jump rope over there. Do you want to go down there? You can split with them. And they were like, no. And then Tiffany went up to me and was like, here's another rope, tie a knot and make it longer. And so while I was in the middle of doing that, the bell rang and recess was over. So I was like, okay. And then we went to put the jump rope back, and Tiffany and Tamron were fighting over it. They're like pulling it on each other, like they wanted to put it back and be the ones to put it back. They kept fighting with it to the end. We went all the way to the trash can where they have all the balls and jump rope, and I had to like, we all 3 of us had to like grab it and put it in the trash can because Tamron or Tiffany would just not let go. They walked the whole way over, just pulling each other. Cute though. And then we went back into class, and then I was gonna show them my muscle trick where I showed my arm being skinny and then I flex it really hard, and I was like, who knows my secret muscle trick? And then Tamron raised her hand and she was like, I know, you're buff. And then she like flexed her muscle, showed her arm, and I was like, yup. And then I showed everyone else. And that was cute. Then we went inside, and in the middle of the Miss Chen's class, there was Gracie, Tiffany, and Tamron. And I was with them, and they were being really funny and cute, and I was asking them how to say stuff in Chinese, and then they did. They told me what yes and what no means, and it was cute, and they were like, "Sure," and "bull." That means yes and no in Chinese. And then I told them about my muscles or something like that. And then I was like, I can do 50 push ups in a row. And they're like, no, you can't do one right now. Do one. And she was like, I can't do 50 push ups. I can do one. And then Gracie just dropped her pencil that she was working on and got on the ground and started just like doing these funny girl push ups. But then she got back up. And then they started working on their project. And then Gracie, I think, got a little more connected to me too after that. She like walked up to me out of nowhere while I was in the middle of the class, and she just walked up to me super close and just looked straight, stared straight up at me because she's like looking straight up because I'm so tall compared to her. She's all tiny, and I just looked into her brown eyes and I was like, "Huh? What? Do you have something? What is it? Are you gonna speak more Chinese?" And she just stared at me and smiled and looked straight up at me for like a good 5 seconds, and that was it. She didn't say a word, and then she just walked away. Funny. And then I was just hanging out and talking with Tamron and Gracie and Tiffany just about stuff and about K-pop Demon Hunters and what their favorite song was, and then how they liked Zoe and Mira and Rumi. And they were being really funny and cute. And then I showed them my muscle, and then they showed their muscles. They flexed. Like, I have muscle, and they both showed me their arm and flexed. Gracie and Tamron. And then, oh yeah, I got their birthdays. Gracie's birthday is October 14th, and Tamron's birthday is September 12th. And then I told them mine, and they were guessing it. I was like, it's in March. What day? And they were like, 10? No. And then they were like, 11, and I was like, oh. And then we went all the way till 17, and I just kept saying no. And then they said 18 together. And then I said, yes, it is. Oh, also, and then Tristan went up to me and was like, hey, I have one question, Mr. Jacob. Um, can you play handball with us at recess? And I was like, no, I don't think I can because I have to go to other classes for homework help, but I'll try to. And then oh yeah, Tiffany went up to me and she was like, Mr. Jacob, how do you spell Labubu? There was a lot of kids who just went up to me just to ask how to spell something, and I helped them. And I helped them. And then we lined up for lunch. And we took them to lunch, and then I was with Veronica, and all of a sudden she wanted to talk a lot, which was like annoying. I wanted to talk to the kids, but anyways, I guess she got out of her shell, but it doesn't matter, it's fine. And then I started talking with Elisa, another girl I think named Emily, and then Gracie. And then I started asking them how to say yes and no in Chinese, and what milk meant, and I was like, nano. And then they laughed all super hard and funny because that was super wrong. And then they laughed all super funny because it was wrong. And then I was like, wait, that's really hard. And then I looked and I was like, how do you say watermelon? And then that other Chinese girl was like, Xigua. And I was like, oh, Xigua. And then after that, I was like, how do you say bye bye? And they were like, they said it in Chinese or whatever, I can't even remember. And then I said, so how do you say no again? And Gracie was like, bull. And Elisa was like, bull. And then I was like, pool. And bull. And I kept saying it over and over, and they just kept correcting me that I was saying it wrong. And Gracie thought it was the funniest thing ever. She just kept laughing every time. Because I kept saying it over and over, and just louder and funnier and dumber. From bull and then to pool. And she just thought it was hilarious. So did Elisa. And then Tamron came over, and I was like, Tamron, bull, sure. Oh, sure, she said. she just started laughing and was like, no, that's not it. And I was like, yeah, bull, shigua. And then they just all started laughing and being funny, and Gracie just kept laughing at me saying bull. And then I was like, how about you guys speak Spanish? I can do Spanish. And then Gracie got up and she was got super up close to me, like skin to skin pretty much almost, and looked straight up at me and was like flailing her arms up at me, almost like I was gonna carry her, but no. But then she was just saying Mandarin, Mandarin, in Mandarin. And then I was like Mandarin, and then I don't know, something else happened. And then all of a sudden I was standing straight up, and behind me I felt two hands on both of my shoulders. And it was one of the kids. And I was like, hey, who is that? And I turned to my left and then turned to my right because I couldn't see anyone. And then I finally turned around and then I saw it was Tamron, who was just crouching on the floor after she let go of my shoulders. And that was so very cute. It felt like a nice warm hug, just the way she did it. And she was like right behind me, standing, doing it. And then they also kept like poking me too in like my back, and then I turn around and be like, where is she? And then the girl would just be on the floor. The Chinese girl should be on the floor, and then she would just be laughing. It was super cute. She was cute, and then she'd get up and just like do whatever. But that one moment when Tamron's hands were on my shoulders, I'm pretty sure it was Tamron's. It might have been Gracie's, or maybe some other girl even. But it was so cute, and they just started all just like grabbing me and hugging me and just all over and just being funny and cute. And then Tamron was like, I don't know why, but she was like, I can touch your head, grab your head. And then I was like, you can't touch my head, I'm too tall. And then she was like, yeah, I can. And she jumped and like tapped it, but pretty lightly. And it was cute. And then I like crouched down to her level and I was like, look, now I'm short as you now. But then I jumped right back up all tall. And then I got on my tippy toes. And then she was like, hey, you're on your tippy toes. And then I was like, yeah. And then I got back down from them. And then she like went to tap my head again and touch it. And I just let her. And it was fun. It was cute. It was light. And it was with love. And then after that, she just started laughing and stuff. And then Gracie and them were just like laughing and being cute, funny and stuff. And then after that, I had to walk them out to recess. And then we were at recess. And then they were like, oh, hey, could you play with us? And I was like, no, sorry, I can't because I had to go to lunch. And so I just dropped them off. And then Tamron was leaving. And I looked back at Tamron. I was like, bye, I'll be back, guys. And so I left for lunch. And then coming back from lunch, I went back to Miss Chen. And then I was with the kids again. And then I was still talking to Tamron and Gracie. and Tiffany, just about stuff, whatever. I actually can't even remember, but it was still just funny and cute. And then I took them to room 303 where they had the pro care people and like they're just summer boosting whatever where they were drawing and painting and stuff. And the lady had a K-pop Demon Hunters coloring printout and they loved it. They ate it up absolutely. They all got it and started drawing on it, coloring it perfectly. And then, of course, the lady who's super awesome for this, she started YouTube playing on the projector for all the kids K-pop Demon Hunters song. She put Golden because they were just like randomly singing it, and then she put it on for real. I have video of it, and they were all singing to it, all perfectly in unison, all perfectly word for word. It was so cute. And then when they started playing the video, the YouTube music videos, so the movie, Tamron and a couple of the other kids got up. And they started dancing to it, and they did the soda pop, and they did like the pointer finger and the pinky thing, and they like pretended to drink, and then were dancing, and it was so cute. And then they are all singing in unison. Even I was singing in unison, and it was just so cute. Tamron, she really loved it. She was dancing and doing all this stuff, and then they were all just looking at it and stuff, and then going back to coloring. And then Tamron went to do this scratcher thing as she was watching the movie, and then they put the ending scene where, they put what it sounds like, and that was cute. They all loved that one too. And then I remember I was sitting next to Tamron and coloring Mira's hat red because Tamron said it was red. Here, get this color red. And I was like, oh, it's red orange. And she was like, no, it's still red. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, okay. So I started coloring Mira's hat. And then after that, Tamron started drawing scratcher thingy, the rainbow scratch off. And then she was like, oh yeah, she traced it with diamond stuff and whatever. And then that was that. And then I took them back to Miss Chen, yeah. And then from there, we just went to after school with all of them. I took attendance, and then oh no, actually we went after that. We went to after K-pop Demon Hunters music videos. We went to this one Chinese lady, room 202, next to the NPR, and they just played with Legos and stuff, and just the building wheels thing. And I was next to Tamron. She had her scratchy thing that she took, and then she was drawing all these things, and she was like, "What should I draw next?" And then she drew a mouse, and then she scribbled it out and was like, "I don't like it." And then she like, "How do you spell blood?" And then I told her, and she was like, "Which B, the belly or the butt?" And I was like, "Belly." And then she spelled it out, and then she drew like a pointer to the mouse and got scribbled out and said it was blood. And then she drew a sword, And then at the sword, she also pointed the sword at the mouse so people know that's like how it got killed. Happened. And then after that, she started drawing random things for me to guess what they were. She drew a Chinese balloon lantern thing, but it was really bad. It looked like a milkshake and not a balloon, whatever. But I was guessing it, and she was like, "Do you give up? Do you give up? No, no, no. Do you give up?" Then she drew a crosswalk, but it just looked like a street. At first, she drew it, and then she was like, there was a tree, but as soon as she drew it, she was like, "Here, guess what this is?" And it's not a tree. And then I was like guessing it. I said street and then road, but she was like, "Nope, it's a crosswalk." And then she drew a circle with like three lines across it, and I was like, "An apple, an orange, a pumpkin." And she was like, "No, no." And then she was like, "Do you give up?" And I was like, "Yes." And then she said, "It's a brain, it's over there." And it was like a picture of the brain on the wall or whatever. Because she was looking around to see what she wanted to draw and write down and think of, because she was just looking around. And then I was like, "Dang, that brain, that was too hard, that was impossible." And she was like, "What? No." And then she started thinking of something else to draw or write. But then, oh yeah, and then we were going to play tic tac toe, but we never got to. We were going to, though. Also, later she pulled out her pencil and was like, "Ah." All cute because she had it. And then from there, we went back to Miss Chen's. And then from there, I took them to after school. I took attendance. And then we went to the NPR for a snack. I was with Promise. And then I was with Tamron and Ethan and Elise. And then we were just talking about cake because it was Tamron's birthday tomorrow, and I was like, "What's your? Do you had ice cream cake?" And she was like, "Yeah, I've had ice cream cake." And Gracie was there too, and she was like, "Yeah, I have." And then I was like, "Oh, nice. What's your favorite ice cream flavor?" And Tamron said mint. And then I said nice. And then Gracie said raspberry. And I think another girl said raspberry. And then I was like, "You guys should guess what mine is. It starts with an R." And they're like, "That's too hard, just tell us." And I was like, "It's rainbow sherbet." And she was like, "Oh, I love rainbow sherbet." And then Melanie was there, and she was like, "Hey, do you know my favorite ice cream flavor?" She said it starts with an O, and I was like, "Oreo," and she was like, "Yeah." And then Tamron also earlier something funny or something. I was like, "Oh yeah, something something," and then like steel. And then she looked at me and was like, "Flint and Steel," all super funny, and scrunched her face. That was hilarious. Super cute, flint and steel. And then after that, we went to room 202 to do the draw along. And it was fine. I was just drawing it along for them. It was whatever though, just step by step. Fine and cute and good enough. Emma was there. She was cute. And then after a while, everyone got done, and Promise just gave out papers for them to just draw more on freestyle, I think, or more. To color their apple red and green. And so then Tamara was sitting alone though, so I went up to check up on her. She looked sad. I was like, "Are you sad? Are you okay?" And she was like, "Yeah." And then after that, I just kept walking around sometime to check, and I just kept checking up on Tamara because she was alone in the back, sitting. And then we stopped the drawing because everyone finished, and then I saw Tamarin alone, so I was like, I'm gonna sit with you, Tamarin, and color with her and stuff. So I got a paper and a pencil, and then I drew out an apple that we were drawing out was with a face. And then as I was drawing the eyes and the mouth, I was like, woo. Each time I made a circle, and she thought it was super funny, and I did it really fast, and she was like, at least you do it fast. And then I was like, this doesn't look that good. I'm really bad at drawing. You don't know this, but I'm bad at drawing. And then I was gonna color it, and then she was like, here, you could have these red color green pencils. She gave me coloring pencils. And then I got them, and I was like, I'm gonna color green. And then I got the green color, and I started coloring it green. And then after that, I was like, green's my favorite color. I did it because, trading, lol, top step. But anyway, I started coloring my apple halfway through, and then I asked her what her favorite color was, and I forgot. I think she said rainbow, actually. She said rainbow, and I was like, whoa, that's actually smart. That's all the colors. And then halfway through, I was coloring. I was like, have you ever seen a yellow apple? Oh, yeah, also during the draw along, Tamara went up to me, just specifically me, and showed me her drawing. And then it was like this big, it was an apple, and then it was actually in front of this big apple tree that she put more apples hanging on the tree, and I thought it was really cute and cool. Like, whoa, that's cool. And then other kids wanted to see it, but she like wanted to hide it. But then eventually she went up to him and just that kid and just showed him the apple tree, and then she was like, oh yeah, cool, whatever. And then from there she went back to her desk, and then I was like, oh, are you gonna color those red and green or all red? And then I was like, I'm gonna color this green, and have you ever seen a yellow apple before? I don't know, we were just funny, being cute, having a good time, and she was really funny. But then Tiffany came up to me saying, hey, I finished this, what else can I do? And I was like, oh, here, I got you. And then I got up and I had to go, like, I don't know, give Tiffany something. And then that's when Yahira came in. to break me. I didn't want to get to put me on break, but I didn't want to go on my break. I wanted to keep being there and coloring with Tamara, and I had to just get up and leave her. That sucked. That was annoying. Lost 15 precious minutes with her. I lost. But oh well. And then after that, I came back. And also, too, during snack, we played imaginary tic-tac-toe. And she stood up and she was like, imaginary tic-tac-toe. And she's like, I put an X in the middle. Tic-tac-toe. I was like, I can beat you in tic-tac-toe. We never got to play on the scratchy. Because we were going to, but then we had to clean up and leave. And then we played then she said, I'm gonna put an X in the middle. And then I was like, I'm gonna put O in the top left. And then we started drawing it out imaginarily with our minds while she was standing right next to me. So cute. At the table. And then I was said, I'll put an O on the top right. And then she was like, I put an X on the top. And I was like, and then she was like, I win. And then I was like, what? No, you put 3? I thought you only put 2. And they were like, no, I put 3. And I was like, what? No. And then Tamron said, see, I told you I was good at it. And then they laughed and it was funny and cute. And then after that, we went to draw, and then I came for my break, and then for my break, Tamron and them, they had to leave. And then I got 4 through 6, and they were fine and cute. I met a couple more kids, but Queena was there, and she was like, are you going to be our coach? And then she smiled and was like 6'7". And then I saw Dakota, she was being funny, and then Anna and Annie, and then another girl named Cielo, and then a couple more kids. I also talked to another girl, I think her name was Natalie, or I don't know, but she was talking to her. She was funny. She was like, I used to have a dog because I'm a dog person, and like really funny, and said it all cute and funny. And then she was like, you should just move out. And I was like, it's not easy. And she was like, oh yeah, well, that's true. I was like, aren't you already old enough to have a dog? Just move out. And I was like, it's not easy. I still live with my parents. It was funny. And then the Cassie girl was like, let's play music. And I was like, no, I can't. If I ask, it's going to be no. And she was like, what do you know? You don't know. You haven't asked yet. You're not curious. She was talking like an adult. It was funny and cute. And then I was talking with Dakota about her siblings and her dog. And she was funny. I was like, come on, we gotta draw. She was like, I shall not. All funny and cute. And then I said, Dakota, you're funny. And then she did like a funny face. And then I was like, Dakota, Tamara, and them are your sisters. And she was like, yeah. And then, anyways, after that, not too much. Still talking with Anna and Annie. They were cute doing her. Annie, she was doing a lot of just hair flips with her girliness. It was funny and cute, though. And then later, she kept poking me when we were outside. She poked my butt. It was kind of funny. And I turned around and I started poking her with the walkie. She kept poking me in my arms just like repeatedly. It was funny and cute, though. And then earlier, too, I asked Dakota, I was like, Dakota, she showed me her snake. And I was like, hey, could I use your snake to attack Anna? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, thanks. And then I like super small funnily like hit Anna on her leg, and then she was like, and then she like pretended to punch fight me, and I was like, okay, thanks for letting me use it, and I gave it back to her. And then after that, we went to outside. We lined them up and took them to the Pure Joy place. And then as we were walking, they were like, where are we going to go? And I was like, we're going to Pure Joy Soccer. And then they all in unison were like, no. And I was like, it's not my decision to make. And then Cassie said some funny shit, but I could barely hear her. But yeah, really good day today. And then later, to end everything off, we went to the NPR. There's not many kids left. And then Tamara was there, and she showed me her notebook. And she was like, this is the notebook I was talking about. And then in it, she asked me, she's like, how do you spell promise again? And I was like, and I showed her Primise. And then after that, I was like, oh, is she gonna write me? Because it said, I love Miss Promise. And then she wrote, I love. And then she was like, how do you spell Mr.? And I was like, Mister. And then she was like, she looked at me all funny and cute. She's like, how do you spell your name? And I was like, Jacob. And then she had to like scrunch it in, and she put my B backwards, but it was funny, still cute and funny. She was like, yeah, and I was like, yay, I got in. She said, I love Mr. Jacob, and that melted my heart, man. That really made my day. It was so cute. I really want a kid like that. A love like that. So cute. I'm glad I made it in her list. I remember the other day too, she was like, Miss Promise is my favorite coach, and I was like, can I be your second favorite coach? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, nice. And then she looked at Jordan, and then I think the other coach, I don't know who it was, but it was Jordan and someone else. She's like, that's 3 and 4. And I started laughing so hard. And it was just so, cute. I really got attached to Tamron today. And I just love how she wrote my name down, says, I love Miss Promise and I love Mr. Jacob right under it. It was so cute at the end of the day. And she was like, you both made it. And so, like, that just means a lot to me in my heart. And it's so cute. I love her so much. And I really hope to have a kid that day like that, have something like that, to have that joy like that in life. It's something special. So, yeah. See you in the next one. Great Thursday. Great 4th day. Last day tomorrow.